Praise be Jesus Christ. I'm really honored to have with me today Mr. Raymond Arroyo. Welcome, Raymond.
How are you, Father?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Hanging in there.
Good, good. You wrote a beautiful little book, and I read it. And this little book packs a punch, and it's a children's book. It's called The Thief Who Stole Heaven. And it's the story of the good thief. You remember that our Lord Jesus said to the good thief, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And to me, it's one of the most hopeful lines in the whole Bible. What can you tell us about your children's book?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's not a children's book. I consider these family reads, and I will tell you why. I consider them family reads because, first of all, like all good children's literature, they appeal to people on two levels. You know, when I was a child and I read Peter Pan, it meant one thing to me. When I read it as an adult to my children later, I'm covered in tears because I realized all the things in the background and in the shadows that I'd missed as a child. So I write these books with that mindset. They're really for humans at different places in their development. So I wanted to make this a family read because I'd never heard, aside from the little tale you told, the good thief hanging on the cross at the end of his life. We really don't know anything about this guy. So when I came across the writings of Augustine, St. John Chrysostom, Peter Damian, they all wrote of the origins of this good thief. And I thought, why have I never heard this story? It's ridiculous. So I dug through, pulled these little bits of, I consider them historical notes. I don't think it's a legend, contrary to the title page of the book. I think it's probably got far more veracity than fiction involved here. Because think of it, Father, look, you know better than I. The gospel itself says everything that happened, everything Jesus did is not contained in these pages. That's true. These were part of an oral tradition, these stories passed along. Not all of them made the final cut or even were carried down the line to the people who finally recorded them and wrote them down. So this may have been a piece of the story that fell out. And though it stayed in the community, it didn't make it into the Bible. But just as a storyteller, it never made sense to me, frankly, to have a hardened, thieving killer hanging on the cross next to Jesus, suddenly defending this Nazarene he'd never met before, and then saying, "You're my Lord and take me to paradise with you." None of that quite made sense to me. With this addendum of what went before, the forces and the events that shaped the good thief, it makes that final act, it makes those final words so much richer. And look, if somebody like St. Augustine took the time to capture this story, I thought maybe it's my responsibility to shape it into a narrative and popularize it a bit so people understand it and have it. Because to me, it made that moment of the Holy Week liturgy and that moment of Good Friday more real and more impactful and more personal, frankly.
Yeah, I was really impressed. Like at the end of the book, you just give a summary of, you don't call it the legend, but the historic. What do you call it? The historical.
I don't even know.
I know. A minute earlier you said you don't call them legends, you call them historical notes or historical.
Well, these are they're historical side notes. They're little bits of history. You know, that's all a legend is, by the way. A legend is not something that's fabulated and made up. It's not fiction. A legend is a bit of history that then is encrusted with story over time. That's a legend. So, yeah. I think
what's fascinating is, again, at the back of the book, you start listing the saints, the mystics that you source for this story, and it's quite impressive. And so when you read the story, it gives it a little more historical reliability. You're like, this isn't just a made-up story. This finds basis in so many saints and mystics. Let's talk a bit about just this mystery. He's dying on the cross. He was a thief. Right. And Jesus tells him, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." Like, what I love about, bringing this story to children is it gives them hope that, we're broken. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to mess up in our life, but we should never lose hope. And this gospel story kind of resounds with the mercy of God. Do you want to just speak about his mercy?
Well, people often say during the Christmas season, we need a little Christmas. This Easter, I say we need a little Dismas, okay? Because we've lost sight of that mercy endures forever. And that's really if there's something that leapt out at me as I was writing it, it is the mercy of God is forever. No one is truly lost. None are left behind. And that the idea of the glance of God and what that does to an individual. And we played with that in the illustrations as well. The glance of God, how transfixing, convicting, and comfortable that moment is. And look, this man, like so many of us, early in his life, he encounters grace unasked for, unexpectedly, and he lets it go by, and he makes bad choices after that moment of grace. And then he gets a second chance. He encounters that same grace again, and he makes the right choice. And it seems a radical one, but indeed it's very tied to the earlier choice he made. And I not to ruin anything for the audience, but the story goes that Dismas may have encountered Christ as a young man on these highways with the intention of robbing the Holy Family on their way to Egypt. What transpires there sort of lays the predicate for his whole life and the great finale that we know. But look, Father, the other thing that I guess struck me as I delved into the story and pieced it together, it is not only that before saints and apostles and even the Blessed Virgin Mary, the first person to crash through the gates of heaven was not Moses or Elijah, but this degenerate thief killer, because that God saw the goodness there and better drew out the goodness at just the right moment. That should fill us all with hope and caution us to, I think often we write people off. We discard people. That one's this or that one is. And he does that all the time. And we write them off. That's wrong. And it's bad. And it's cruel. Because we are judging them in a way God doesn't. And I think that also, kids understand that. I got a letter from a little girl that said, after reading your book, I realized even though my daddy did bad things, her father was in prison. Even though my daddy did bad things, God still loves him. And he might be able to help God someday. And I thought, maybe this is the child I wrote the book for.
Yeah. Well, I read it a few times, and I mean, it's excellent. And every time I read it, it tugs at my heartstrings. And I also discover new little details that, hey, I never noticed that the first time. Raymond, how can people get a copy of The Thief Who Stole Heaven?
They can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, EWTN's catalog, wherever books are sold. The book is there. And I've been touched and amazed at the way people have taken it to heart. And look, wanted to do. All I try to do with every story I'm telling is to cleanly and clearly tell that story and hopefully get inside the skin and heart of those characters so that I can honestly portray them. Then you let the story tell itself, and it does, and it did. And look, I take some liberties around the edges here, particularly in that meeting between the Christ child and Dismas. We don't know what happened there. The historical record is silent. But that's our job as storytellers, to fill in those gaps without violating the surrounding story that we know. And whether that's Zeffirelli or Mel Gibson or me here, it's sacred material, it's tender material, but it's important for us to reimagine it, to give people a new way in so that the truth that's been lying there, frankly, unattended and ignored, is re-explored and understood again. And that's really what I hoped to do here when I stumbled across this great story. And look at the arc of that life. I mean, the guy is a killer. Dismas means sunset, death. So he was the prince of death to the highwaymen there in Judea. And yet this is a guy that of all the people in the world, Jesus takes into heaven with him first. So I think it's a lesson for all of us and an important reflection, particularly this time of year.
Yeah, well, you did an excellent job, and I hope this book finds its home in many people's homes. And one thing I'm going to do with this book is sometimes people say, Father, I'm going on retreat. What book would you recommend? And, along with another spiritual book, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Take this along.
Right.
Because, again, every time I read it, it's like, wow, this is beautiful. And also the artwork is just very touching, powerful. So
Randy did a beautiful job.
Thank you for writing the book, and thank you for taking the time to share it with us. And keep up all your good work, especially.
Thank you, Father. Keep me in your prayers, and happy Easter, happy Holy Week.
Thank you. You too. God bless you.
Thank you.